How's it going, everybody? My name is LuckyBunz, and as of September 16th, we now have a new rotation of Team Rocket grunts and leaders. We normally get a Team Rocket takeover once per season, and so what essentially happened was that we had one at the end of the last season, and now we have one at the start of the new season. This also means that the next Team Rocket takeover will be at least a few months away, so if you have Pokemon that you need to TM Frustration on, make sure to do it now, or it's going to be quite some time before you're going to be able to do it again. Now, we didn't really get a big shakeup during this Rocket Grunt rotation, but we did get some new PvP updates a few weeks ago, so there's a lot of things that, kind of got moved around in the meta here. So with that said, now let's get into the best Shadow Pokemon you should be focusing on with this current rotation. Now, we're going to start off this video a bit differently than we normally do. We're going to focus on the new rotations of grunts, and there were only 4 grunts that actually got changes to their lineups. Everything else is basically the same, and so I'm going to go through that section of the video a bit quicker since we already talked about it like a month ago. Anyways, though, let's focus on the new grunt rotations right now. So we're going to have the Poison type grunt first. So basically what changed with the Poison type grunt is that we replaced Trubbish with Qwilfish, and Qwilfish is going to be a new Shadow Pokemon. Otherwise, we have the same lineup. In the first row, we're going to have Tentacool and then Skorupi, and then in the second slot, we're going to get Nidorino, Nidorina, and then Galarian Weezing. Actually, I think Galarian Weezing is new for the Poison type grunt as well. Now, that Pokemon does rank very well in the Open Ultra League still, so if you do happen to get it, I mean, that could be pretty damn good. Otherwise, in terms of meta relevance here, Tentacool evolves into Tentacruel, that's going to be in the top 20 for the Open Ultra League, and then Skorupi evolves into Drapion, which is going to be in the top 60 for the Open Ultra League. Also, Tentacool and Skorupi both have the chance to be Shadow Shiny, so you definitely want to be doing the Poison type grunt as much as possible. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, since I didn't talk about Qwilfish here, if that's actually any good in PvP. Well, it ranks in the top 200 for the Open Great League, so it's not terrible, but it's definitely not as meta relevant as some of the other options out there. It could change in the future, so like if you do happen to get a good IV spread, I would still hold on to it. I just probably wouldn't build it right now. Next up, let's talk about the Psychic type grunt. So basically what changed here is that Inkay got replaced with Baltoy. Now, Baltoy, when evolved into Claydol, does rank in the top 150 for the Open Great League, and it actually ranks a bit better in its non-Shadow version, so keep that in mind. If you happen to get a good IV spread, it might be worth purifying. But then again, meta rankings change all the time, so you might want to just keep the Shadow because I think that's a little bit harder to get. But anyways, yeah, Baltoy is going to be the new Shadow here, and then otherwise we have Ralts as well, which I love to see. And actually, before I filmed this video, I ended up getting a Shadow Hundo Ralts. That's my 4th Shadow Hundo ever. I could not stop freaking out for like 10 minutes. Like, I'm not even kidding when I say that. That is like one of the best Shadow Hundos you can get in the game. As far as fairy type attackers go, it is one of the best, so I'm super stoked on that. Anyways, just kind of wanted to share that really quick. I was super hyped about it, still am to be honest. But yeah, overall the grunt really hasn't changed all that much. I do hope that Ralts is weighted a bit more now, because in the past Inkay was weighted a lot more, so you would encounter Inkay just a lot more frequently when you did these. And because Baltoy is the new Shadow Pokemon, I'm hoping that Ralts is now the Pokemon you encounter more often for, more chances at the Shadow Shiny. Next up, we have the normal type grunt. So basically what changed here is that we replaced Bidoof with Swablu. Now, Swablu, when evolved into Altaria with 400 candy, so it's not exactly a cheap investment here, that is going to be in the top 70 for the Open Great League. Now, this could change in the future as well. It could become more meta relevant, could become less meta relevant. Altaria has been a pretty good Pokemon in the Open Great League for a very long time. Even when it goes up and down in the meta, it still maintains some pretty good relevance. So if you do happen to get a really good IV spread on your Swablu, definitely worth investing into this Pokemon. At least evolve it. You don't have to power it up or anything just yet until you actually want to run it in PvP. And then also for any of the Swablu that you get that just really aren't that good, they're 1k purification, so you can work on that purifying metal. On top of that though, we do have Slackoth and Bunnelby. So Bunnelby, when evolved into Diggersby, is going to still be in the top 30 for the Open Great League, a great Pokemon to grab. Now finally we have the Dragon type grunt. So what happened here is that Dratini was replaced with Dino, and what was actually interesting is that they didn't put Dino in the Dark type grunt, which I guess maybe it's just rarer this way. But yeah, a bit unfortunate. I kind of wish they had replaced Tyrunt with, Dino instead, and then we had 2 Shadow Shiny chances. I'm a bit bummed to see Dratini leave, because I still never got that Shadow Shiny. But yeah, we still have Bagon, which is going to have the chance to be Shadow Shiny, and then Tyrunt, which is okay to use. Like, you can evolve it all the way up in Tyrantrum, and then use it as a Rock-type attacker in the Raid Sauce Gym meta. It's still a pretty good option. You do have better options out there, like, Shadow Rhyperior, but As far as not having to invest into any Elite TM Legacy movesets, Shadow Tyrantrum is actually pretty good. And then in terms of Salamence when evolved from Bagon all the way up, that's a pretty good Pokemon too. I've mentioned this many times in the past, I do have a 98% IV Shadow that I maxed out to level 50, so I use that thing actually quite frequently against the Dragon-type Grunt. It just hits so hard with Dragon Tail, it's amazing. And now when it comes down to, Shadow Hydreigon, right? How good is this Pokemon? Is it actually worth, powering up? Is it worth investing into? So Hydreigon does rank in the top 30 for the Open Master League, which I think is pretty damn good, especially considering that it's not a legendary Pokemon. And then when it comes down to the Raid/Gym meta, it's about as good as Shadow Tyranitar, but the downside here is that Shadow Hydreigon does require the legacy moveset Brutal Swing, whereas on Tyranitar that is not a legacy moveset. So if you had to pick between the two, I'm still going to say that Shadow Tyranitar makes more sense because it's one less Elite TM. Now again, that is going to be for the Dark type meta. What about for the Dragon type meta? So when it comes down to Shadow Hydreigon as a Dragon type, it doesn't really get access to a good moveset, so I wouldn't worry about it there. That pretty much covers the new Shadow Pokemon though. Of course, Shadow Dino is going to be the main hunt, I think, for most players out there. It's the most desirable of all the new Shadow Pokemon in my opinion. But that being said, we still have a lot of great Pokemon you guys should be hunting from the other Rocket Grunts, so let's go over those right now. Now once again, because I went over this stuff about a month ago, I'm sure it's pretty fresh in a lot of your minds, so I'm just going to go over the best Pokemon you should be focusing on here. So from the Fire-type Grunt, we're going to have Darumaka, which evolves into Darmanitan. Great Pokemon to build as a Fire-type attacker for the Raid/Gym meta. For the Grass-type Grunt, we're not going to have anything that's going to be meta-relevant. Jumpluff was meta-relevant before, but since we got the recent meta changes in PvP, that's no longer as good as it once was. Therefore, the only thing that you should be focusing on if you actually want it is going to be Seedot for the chance at a Shadow Shiny. For the Water-type Grunt, we're going to have a few different options here. Magikarp, of course, is going to be always worth focusing on, not only for the 1k purification, but if you do happen to get a really good IV spread, you could evolve it into Gyarados. That does rank in the top 50 for the Open Master League. It's decent to use in the Raid/Gym meta as well, but if you do want to run it for the Open Master League, you have to give it Aqua Tail for PvP. Very, very important. And then otherwise, if you do happen to encounter Staryu, I would always do those as well, because that's going to give you 750 Stardust per catch. Next up, for the Electric-type Grunt, we're going to have Magnemite, which does have the chance to be Shadow Shiny. As far as meta relevance goes for all these other Pokemon, I mean, they're okay, but, wouldn't really worry about it too much. The Shadow Shiny Magnemite is the main hunt. For the Flying-type Grunt, we're going to have Pikipek, which is a 1k purification. I'd make sure to do those if you do encounter it. Next up, for the Ghost-type Rocket Grunt, we're going to have Shadow Shiny Sableye potentially in the second slot. That's going to be a pretty low chance of encountering it, but if you do happen to get it, man, that's pretty damn rare. Not to mention, Sableye is also going to give you 750 Stardust per catch, so definitely make sure to do those when you can. And then as far as meta relevance goes, the best one to really focus on here is going to be Duskull. When you evolve it into its second form, Dusclops, is going to rank in the top 30 for the Open Great League. And then when you evolve it all the way up into its final form, Dusknoir, is going to be in the top 20 for the Open Great League and number 4 in the Open Ultra League. So a really, really good Pokemon. Keep doing these Ghost-type Grunts for a chance at a really good IV spread on Dusclops or Dusknoir. When it comes down to the Dark-type Grunt, we're going to have Shadow Shiny Cacnea and Shadow Shiny Carvanha potentially being available, and then we also have Alolan Rattata, which is going to be a 1k purification. In the Bug-type Rocket Grunt, we're going to have 3 different Shadow Shinies potentially, so a great one you guys should always be doing. We have Shadow Shiny Pineco, Shadow Shiny Scyther, and then in the second slot we have Shadow Shiny Anorith. Now additionally, on top of that, when Pineco evolves into Fortress and then Scyther evolves into Scizor, they do rank decently well in PvP, so if you do happen to get a good IV spread, I would hold on to that. Next up, for the Fighting-type Grunt, we're going to have Shadow Shiny Machop in the first slot, and then we're going to have Girder in the second slot, which evolves into Conkeldurr. Really, really good Pokemon to build for the Raid/Gym meta as a Shadow Fighting type. And then we do also have Shadow Mankey, which does have some decent relevance as Primate, but then also as Annihilate in PvP. For the Rock-type Grunt, we're going to have Graveler as a 1k purification if you do happen to get it. Then we're also going to have Tyrunt, which we talked about earlier in the Dragon-type Grunt rotation. Same thing, Tyrantrum's going to be good as a Rock-type attacker for the Raid/Gym meta. And if you are lucky enough to get it, Cranidos in the second slot when evolved into Rampardos is one of the best Rock-type attackers you can build in the game. So if you happen to get that with a good IV spread, you basically won the Rock-type Grunt in my opinion. Now for the Ground-type Grunt, we actually have a few good options here as well. So we have a Shadow Shiny chance with a Gligar in the first slot. We also have a Drillbur, which evolves into Excadrill, a great Pokemon to build for the Raid/Gym meta. Also a great Pokemon to stock up Candy on for the Dynamax version. That's very useful to use in max battles. And then in the second slot, we have Rhyhorn, which is very difficult to encounter, but when evolved into Rhyperior, this is one of the best Pokemon you guys can use in the game. It can be used as a ground type, it can be used as a rock type, although for a rock type, you do want to ideally have the exclusive Comday moveset Rock Breaker, which is going to require an Elite TM. Very much worth giving it to it if you have a good IV spread. Now, as far as the fast moves, you can either run Mud Slap as a ground type moveset or Smackdown as a rock Rock-type moveset depending on what you're going up against, but trust me when I say this, both of those moves hit super hard, especially with the Shadow bonus. Like, they annihilate Rocket Grunts. So great Pokemon to build. You can use it in PvP, you can use it in Rockets, you can use it in Raids. It's such an amazing Pokemon. Definitely one of the best Pokemon you guys can grab from this current rotation, but it is very difficult to encounter because it is going to be in that second slot. Next up, let's take a look at the Ice-type Grunt. So we're going to have Shadow Shiny Sneasel available. We're also going to have Sneasel evolving into Weavile being relevant in the Raid/Gym meta. It is more focused on the DPS side as kind of a glass cannon, but still very good to use. And then of course we do also have a Shadow Swinub, which evolves all the way up into Mamoswine. White Kurim and even Black Kurim are going to be better Ice-type attackers, but we have no idea when we're going to get those Pokemon back in raid battle, so we can actually get the energy on them. And therefore, as of the time of making this video, in terms of accessibility, Shadow Mamoswine is the best Pokemon you can build as an Ice-type attacker right now, and then you could also use it as a Ground-type attacker as well. It's quite versatile. I did actually mention this Pokemon in my most recent video going over the best value non-legendary Pokemon, so again, if you do happen to get a good IV spread, I do think it is worth building. Some people might argue and disagree, saying that like you should save your resources for White Kurim, and that's a valid point, but we have no idea when that Pokemon's going to be coming back into rotation. When it comes down to the Steel-type Rocket Grunt, there's only one Pokemon worth paying attention to here. That's going to be Beldum evolving all the way up into Metagross. Now for Metagross, you do want to ideally have the Legacy moveset Meteor Mash, and if you don't, it's not nearly as good, so if you happen to get a really good IV spread or a Shadow Shiny, I think it is worth it. Otherwise, I would still hold off. Especially if you already have Zacian and Zamazenta build, those are much better Steel-type attackers. I wouldn't worry about this one too much, but that Shadow Shiny, man, I'm still hunting that. Next up in the Fairy-type Grunt, we're going to have Shadow Shiny Mawile still available, and then we're going to have Kirlia in the second slot, which, as I mentioned earlier with the Psychic-type Grunt with Ralts here, Gardevoir is one of the best Fairy-type attackers you guys can build for the Raid/Gym meta. Following that, we're going to have the Rare Grunt Male, which is still going to have the same Pokemon. It's going to be the Kanto starter, so you have a chance to get a Shiny Shadow Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle. All excellent Pokemon, very rare to encounter. In terms of meta relevance though, they're not really all that good when they evolve all the way up into their final form, so I mean, I think it's more for the hunt of the Shadow Shiny rather than for the meta relevance here. And then taking a look at the Rare Grunt Female, this hasn't changed in forever, so it's still going to be Snorlax, great Pokemon to grab for the G-Max candy or just to use as a gym defender. But even then, I think Chansey and Blissey are much better as gym defenders, so it's up to you if you want to take on the challenge of the Rare Grunt Female. It's the most difficult Rocket Grunt to actually battle next to the team leaders, and I think for that reason it could be really fun, or it's something you could just kind of skip because it's just too much effort. And then finally, we're going to have the Decoy Grunt, which is still going to have the Shadow Shiny chance at Bellsprout. I think those are worth doing if you guys do actually have your Super Rocket Radar. Now again, you have to have a Super Rocket Radar in order to actually encounter the Decoy Grunt. Do not battle Giovanni. If you do and you lose your only Super Rocket Radar, you could not do these. And currently the Shadow Legendary Pokemon that's in rotation right now isn't really worth grabbing, so we're going to talk about that in just a second. Before we do that though, let's go over the new team leader rotations with the regular Rocket Radar. So first of all these Pokemon will have the chance to be Shadow Shiny, and they're going to have a boosted Shiny rate of 1 out of 64, so pretty good odds to actually get them. Arlo's going to get access to Wobbuffet, which can actually be used in the Open Great League when purified, but that being said, it's not really that good anymore. It ranks in like the top 600 now, which is actually pretty terrible, but it used to be really good, and so maybe one day it could be better in the future, but there is still an upside here for Wobbuffet, and that's going to be that it's still a great gym defender thanks to its typing and its low CP. It's going to decay much slower compared to other Pokemon you drop in gym, so if you do happen to get a Shadow Shiny, you might want to consider, keeping it as is and just powering that up. That could be fun to drop in gyms. You could also purify it if you want to because, in terms of meta relevance here, that could maybe be used in niche cups for the Open Great League, and so if you want to get dual functionality, I can definitely see that being an appeal. It doesn't get to 1500 CP, so the best IV spread possible is going to be what you want. Next up, Sierra is going to get access to Shadow Feebas, which evolves into Milotic. You do have to walk at 20 kilometers as your buddy to do this. This has some play in the Open Ultra League, but otherwise it's really not all that good. I still think the Shadow Shiny looks really nice though, so maybe you guys want to hunt that. Same thing with Wobbuffet. I feel like it's mostly just for the chance of a Shadow Shiny. They do have relevance in other aspects of the game, but that Shadow Shiny hunt is the main appeal in my opinion. And then finally, Cliff has access to Shadow Larvitar, which evolves all the way up into Shadow Tyranitar and is one of the best Dark-type attackers you guys can use in the game. It's actually the best non-Mega, so I mean, yeah, it's literally the best in the game. If you don't have any strong Dark-types built, you should 100% be focusing all of your Rocket Radars on Cliff during this rotation and for the next couple of months. It is by far going to be one of the best investments you guys can make for your Raid/Gym teams. Overall though, I think Cliff is the #1 hunt. I think next to that maybe Arlo is #2, and then for #3 that's probably Sierra. But I think a rotation is actually decent. I am sad to say that I didn't get the Shadow Shiny Cyndaquil from the previous rotation. I only had like a month to really farm those, so I did the best that I could. I did a lot of them, but I didn't get it. I ended up getting Shadow Shiny Chikorita, which I'm not unhappy about. I think that was pretty cool to get, but I would have really liked to get that Shadow Shiny Cyndaquil, maybe sometime in the future when it comes back. Now finally, let's go over the Shadow Legendary Pokemon from Giovanni with the Super Rocket Radar. For those of you guys unfamiliar on how to actually get a Super Rocket Radar, you actually get a special Team Go Rocket research, or you should have access to it right now at the start of this event, and you just complete that. I think at like page 4 you get access to the Super Rocket Radar. That's what you use to battle Giovanni. If you want like a more in-depth analysis on how this stuff works, I'm going to recommend checking out this video on screen right now. But otherwise, when it comes down to Shadow Tornadus Incarnate as the featured Pokemon from Giovanni right now, let me just tell you this Pokemon is terrible in every possible way. It's not even kinda good in PvP, and when it comes down to raid battles, it is slightly better than just a regular Staraptor, not even like Shadow Staraptor, just a regular Staraptor. So should you actually stack your Super Rocket Radar? Well, I feel like this one's pretty obvious, and the answer is yes. I don't think there's any reason to focus on this. We're eventually gonna get this in Shadow Legendary raid battles at some point. Just be patient. I think if you really want it right now, you can grab it if you desire, but I gotta imagine that's like a really small percentage of the player base, and maybe those are just like the casual players who just kind of want to have it to have it. Otherwise, I think it's better to stack your Super Rocket Radar, especially if you don't even have one stacked yet. Stack your Super Rocket Radar, do the Decoy Grunts for the Shadow Shiny Bellsprout. I guarantee you're going to have a lot more fun doing that than using it on Shadow Tornadus. That being said though, if you guys do need a quick refresher on stacking your Super Rocket Radar, or if you want to just know what the best Pokemon are to lucky trade in the game, then check out these videos next.